I could have gone in if my parents would have signed for me to go in. I asked my father about that. He said, no way. And he explained to me why, the race and all of that. So he felt, gee, I majored in math in high school. I wanted to be an engineer. And so I figured, I'm not going to go into the Navy and be a mess attendant, which is people of color, that's what they did to them, see. So I held off, and then eventually got a chance to fly. So the Army and Navy announced that if you're 17 and a high school graduate, you can take the exam, which I did. And I passed it, and I was sworn in as a private in the reserve. With that, I didn't have to register for the draft, because I was already part of the military. And in late June, they gave me orders to report the 13th of July. And the 3 of us from Philadelphia area slated for Tuskegee. But we traveled to Biloxi, Mississippi. We went through 6 weeks of basic training. And on that trip, it was our first trip into the segregated South. But they put us on Pullman cars to go to Biloxi, Mississippi, which was great, you know. And the 3 of us, we had a section, 2 bunks on each side. So we had the whole section, 2 of us on one side and 1 on the other. But whites were in the rest of the car, see, white people. So we had that. We went from Philadelphia to, and for the first time I ate in a dining car, a menu that was great, as the scenery went by. And I got into Cincinnati, Ohio, overnight. Next morning, got in there. We had to catch an L&N train to go from Cincinnati. It went from Cincinnati down to Mobile and then over to New Orleans. Thing. When we got on that, segregation rules took an effect. Now, we still had our Pullman section. The rest of the car was all white people. The change we noticed was when we went to the dining car to eat, at the end of the dining car, they had a big, heavy curtain across the aisle. And we had to eat at tables behind that curtain, so white people couldn't see us in the car, see. And that was our introduction to segregation in the South. While I was there, I went into town once, but the town was segregated, see. There weren't any places just to go, you know, unless you knew blacks went here. And so we were at Tuskegee Army Airfield or on campus, and that was it. We had to get 10 hours flying in a P-40, the first fighter we flew, so I flew that. And then in November, we shipped out to Waldoboro, South Carolina to fly to get combat crew training. And our instructors there were flying the P-47 Thunderbolt. And our instructors were pilots who had flown the P-47 in combat. And we spent several months flying with them where they would take us up to games and dogfights, things like that, teach us the tactics they used in combat. And then we prepared to go overseas. So we finished that in January, and in February we shipped overseas to Italy. At our field at Ramatelli, it was on the eastern coast of Italy. And when you took off to the east, right after you lifted off, you're out over the Adriatic, and that's where we were stationed. So, and when I got there, there were 4 squadrons, but right in March they eliminated the 302nd Fighter Squadron, which brought it down to 3 squadrons, the 99th, 100th, and the 301st, which is what a normal group consisted of, fighter group, 3 squadrons. I just went through a transition period, learning to fly the P-51, and then we were scheduled for missions. So in March and April, I flew 21 combat missions before the war ended. So. But things were winding down. In fact, the only aircraft we ran into on an escort mission then were several times the 262, the jet fighters. But the German Air Force had been gradually eliminated. You know, over the months they were losing planes and pilots. And where could they train them? We had planes flying all over Germany. If we saw an airplane on the ground, we'd shoot it up. So they weren't able to really train new replacements. And they had trouble even building new airplanes, say, because if we knew a factory was someplace, we'd bomb it, say. So just war of attrition as far as they're concerned. So we never got too close to it. We saw it coming in, and we turned into it. We took off, turned into it, and he turned away, say. In fact, each time they turned away and left us. They were much faster than we were. but then we stayed close to the bombers. When you're escorting them, you S over them. Like you have one group, one squadron, if you have, didn't matter how many airplanes you have. You might have a few flights or even a squadron up here high, and you have one over here, one behind. You, depending on how many airplanes you had, depending where you put them. And you're always S-ing because you're going faster than them. You want to have your speed up in case the fighters come in. And that way you're able to keep your speed up and turn into them if they attacked you. We got back, and I went right back to Tuskegee, say. And Tuskegee, everything segregated just like as if nothing had changed, say. And, but the thing of it was that I got back in the fall of 1945, and I stayed there until the summer of '46 when Tuskegee closed. And I was more a supervisory pilot. See, classes were still graduating from Tuskegee. But once they graduated, it had nothing to go, so they stayed there to piling up, say. And so I was one of the people who would take people like that up, people who had graduated, and teach them things. They had to get flying time every month. So that's what I would do until the summer of '46 when the last class graduated in June of '46, and they closed Tuskegee. I wanted to go to NYU in the Bronx. The engineering school was up in the Bronx. So I went to New York, but I got married, which was a thing that affected it too. And my wife got pregnant right away. So that made all the change and difference. And the Air Force became a separate service in '47, September. Later that year, Colonel Davis sent letters to some of us, asking us to come back in because he had a shortage of what he considered skilled fighter pilots. And I got one of those letters in December of '47. And in January, I signed it. I would go back in, provided I finished that semester. So I agreed to report the 3rd of June.